Your change happens in the things that you cannot see versus what you see, and how we all live in a world where we have so many filters, and those filters determine our reality, but our reality is not actually our reality. It just stopped me to think about when we try to get those goals, have those conversations, what is it that we are missing that is a subconscious conversation that we already had? So just a thing for you to think about as we think about today's podcast. And I also brought that in today because I think our guest today may share about how that has shaped their world or not shaped their world as well.
Our nervous system is always scanning our environment for threat and for safety. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're overriding it with our thoughts and our beliefs, then we're abandoning ourselves. The order of operations that I teach is safety, capacity, and sustainable change. So with safety, like your nervous system has to learn that I am safe. But if you're just doing it through discipline and willpower, it's not enough, and it's going to feel really harsh, and over time your body's just going to put a brake, and that's where we go into freeze mode. If they're punishing themselves in that moment, struggle, it's like they're kicking themselves while they're already down. That actually feeds depression and it feeds anxiety. I do these things now because I love my body, not because I hate it. And I think that's where sometimes a lot of people are going into like the gym or changing their lifestyle, changing their diet because they feel like, oh, I have to fix something about myself. But no, it's like, no, like I said, our body is so intelligent. It's your best friend. Please take the time to learn to listen to yourself. Your body already knows the truth and you already have the answers within you.
Our privilege and our real honor to welcome all the way from San Diego, Dr. Minnie, welcome to Bosses of Knowledge. Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. And as always, I love to share what I put into my basket of knowledge over the last week. The one thing that I have put into my basket is I was doing some of my revision for my NLP training that I'm teaching in a few weeks' time. And it just reminded me about the concept of your change happens in the things that you cannot see versus what you see. And how we all live in a world where we have so many filters, and those filters determine our reality, but our reality is not actually our reality. It just stopped me to think about when we try to get those goals, have those conversations, what is it that we are missing? That is our subconscious conversation that we already had. So just a thing for you to think about as we think about today's podcast. And I also brought that in today because I think our guest today may share about how that has shaped their world or not shaped their world as well. And as always, we scour the country, we scour the world to find people that are amazing, and we think everyone's amazing and got a story to tell. Oh, sorry, everybody. And today's guest is someone that I was very lucky and privileged to get in contact with a few weeks ago through someone else on our podcast. So Vicky Tyler, who shared her corporate sleepwalking story a few months ago, said, hey, this is an awesome person that you might want to connect with. And we connected, and I was like, wow, what an amazing story and what an amazing human. So it is our privilege and our real honor to welcome all the way from San Diego, Dr. Minnie. Kia ora, Dr. Minnie, welcome to Bosses of Knowledge.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It's our privilege. Dr. Minnie, for people who know nothing about you, who is Dr. Minnie today on the 29th of January, 2026?
Who am I today? That's a good question because we're always changing, right? Always evolving. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm from California, San Diego. My name's Dr. Manmeet Rattu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and yoga educator and therapist by profession. I have a private practice where I see mostly clients experiencing trauma, stress, and anxiety, and where I use my yoga therapy interventions in teaching the skills and interventions of the science of yoga and meditation as treatment for trauma, stress, and anxiety. So I love to educate my clients, and also now in public workshops and out in the community in speaking engagements, and also upcoming retreat that I'm doing in South Africa in June. I'm really excited about just educating people on how the framework of yoga is really a strong intervention to mitigate the effects of stress in the body, for particularly the brain and nervous system. So I educate people on what is the nervous system, what's happening in your brain when you're experiencing anxiety, stress, trauma, and how the research now shows how yoga and meditation help to reverse many of those effects. So it's a really exciting to teach it and to talk about it because, as we know, yoga and meditation have been around for thousands of years, but it's highly misunderstood. And so I love to present the entire protocol because it is a protocol. It's not just movement. It's not just what you're seeing in the yoga studio. My work is really advocating for yoga in healthcare. So a lot of my students also are doctors, nurses, healthcare workers. I teach a course at Stanford Psychiatry Yoga X program, and that's where we're also working towards bringing this into healthcare systems.
Amazing. I love that. What I loved about that whole dialogue right there was the passion. As you spoke about it, you could just see how your face lit up because obviously, as you said before, these are tools or techniques that have been around for a very, very long time, but they've been modernized into a certain context and they've been visualized in certain contexts. And it's pretty awesome to see someone that goes, actually, yeah, this is awesome, but let's think about the depth of what it actually means. And we'll stick with this framework here. As you think about that, what are your greatest challenges or your greatest joys when you see you've taken something that's been westernized and then you actually, this is what actually the depth of it is? There some challenges that you face, or is it actually this is an epic way to look at yoga meditation?
Thank you for asking that. And I think the challenge is that people just don't know. But when I do talk about it and I share the entire framework of yoga, and when I say the framework, we're talking about the 8 limbs of yoga, the 5 koshas, the 3 gunas, the scientific framework when it comes to managing our life. People are not aware. They never learned. Part of my passion is because yoga has been exploded in many ways, because the asana, the movement piece that we see in yoga studios or when we think of yoga, that's only one piece of the entire framework. And that was extracted by Westerners and it was brought into the West and people were introduced to it. And now it's become this fitness thing. So we're getting a very watered down version of what yoga is. And so I love to teach that it's not just movement, it's self-discipline, it's self-understanding, self-teaching, and also ethics and learning about how you treat yourself and others and living within the systems and the collective and the impact that we have not only with our behaviors, but with our thoughts and our emotions, how we're emitting that energy and communicating with one another all the time. And now in current neuroscience, we call this co-regulation and neuroadaptive practices. But this was already laid out, the entire protocol. But most of the protocol was dismissed or disqualified, and only the fitness piece was taken out of it. And so I love to talk also about cultural appropriation and appreciation and understanding that these frameworks that we're looking at today, and it's great, we can see it in an fMRI today, what's happening, but it was dismissed for a long time. And that's where I also talk about systemic and institutional trauma and all of the layers of trauma and stress. It's not just individual.
And that's so beautiful because, a lot of things in life that we see today, we just see a snapshot, whether it's yoga, meditation, whether it's a nutrition, a diet that people see, or whether it's CrossFit or High Rocks or whatever it is. People just see that 1% of the information, but forget about the depth of whatever that protocol is. So I love the fact that you are educating those around you, but it becomes cool when you actually understand the why and the how behind the science behind it. The opportunity, when I with you, you come across as really confident and really just articulate. But has this always been the person that has been out there, or has this been something you've developed over time?
Thank you for asking that too. And yes, it has developed over time. I grew up in a Punjabi family. Punjab is a state in North India, and I was born and raised in Northern California. And my family, the family I grew up in, I not only just with my brothers and sister and my parents, I grew up with a lot of extended relatives too. So all of my immediate aunts and uncles all lived in Northern California too. And so I have a lot of cousins, grew up with a lot of love and support, but a lot of my cousins are older than me. My dad is 7 out of 9 siblings, so most of my cousins are older, and my mom is the youngest out of 5. And so I was always reliant on what other people want, what other people need. What do they think I should do? So I was a passive communicator and also doubted myself a lot. I didn't really know what I wanted or what I needed, and I relied on others to tell me what to do. And that's just also just growing up with a lot of cultural expectations, growing up in bicultural society, trying to navigate that too. It was just very challenging for me. So for a long time, I was very shy, very passive. And it wasn't until I started when I went to grad school that I started to get more confident. The work that I was teaching and experiences that I continued to have up until that point made me very passionate about the work that I was doing. So with practice also, of course, it takes practice to teach and to speak on stage or in front of people. It became more about the work and the word that I was sharing and less about who I am or what I look like. And so that's what gave me what you see as confidence. But of course, I still sometimes doubt myself. I still, have those days where it's just like I'm questioning myself. But like you said, we're all growing all the time. And this is just where I'm at today.
And that's so beautifully put because, we all see a picture or a version of a person out there and we go, wow, this person has got it all together. And yes, they may have it at that moment in time. But as you said, you might wake up in the morning and go, actually, I'm not really confident. That happens to me as well. I was also speaking and I ran a workshop the other day on Tuesday and it was the first workshop of the year. And I had so much imposter syndrome and I was like, oh, am I meant to be here? It was terrible. But the people thought it was great. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. The story we tell ourselves versus the reality are two very, very different things. And it goes back to the start, the world, the narrative that we tell ourselves. And as you said, you were brought up in a large extended family, and that comes with its awesomeness and also its restrictions as well. And the stories you tell yourself in those ages, when you're young, become the pattern you revert to as you become older, with the way, as you probably know, the brain works. But your life, you've had some really interesting experiences in your life. So you grew up in an extended family and then you had the cultural expectations, or you just lived your life. And when we connected, you spoke about a really important part of your life that really changed the way you looked at the world. Would you like to share how that shifted your perspective of the world?
Yes. So you're talking about when I was married?
Yes, when you married.
Okay. So once I graduated college, I had this expectation that the next thing you do after college is you get married. And so my parents were pretty strict growing up. I wasn't allowed to date. We weren't really allowed to have friends at home. Your cousins are your friends, your siblings are your friends. And so I accepted that. I didn't fight it. It was part of our reality. But again, because there was so much love in our own family, I never felt that there was something missing. And so after I graduated my undergrad, I agreed to have an arranged marriage. And so I actually went to India and I met my now ex-husband at the time. We met for about 4 hours, and he had an uncle that lived in California who actually was the mutual person. And then my mom's niece, like her cousin's daughter, like a distant relative, was the one on our side. They are the ones who kind of did the matching. So my parents actually didn't really know this person either. So this was new to all of us. And when you grow up in a home or in a family where there's so much love and with what we call secure attachment, you don't really question what if, or this person could be lying, or things could go wrong. At least that wasn't in my mind at the time. I was in my early 20s, so I think I was about 24, but I was about like 14, 15 in my head, if you think about it, just as far as my experiences at that time. So I didn't even know what to ask when I met this person. So we went to this big restaurant and then they told us to go sit at another table across so we can talk. And I was, again, so shy. I think I asked 2 questions. I asked, like, what do you do, or what do you want to do when you come to the States? And what did you study? And that's it. That's all I asked. And what happened afterwards was we got engaged like the very next day in India. And then I came back. I was only there for a total of 10 days, so I didn't get to really spend much time. But during that time, even when I met him, there was a part of me that felt like something was off, or I don't really know if this is the right decision for me. But his uncle kept pushing it, like, this is the right person for you. I'm going to make sure he takes care of you. The uncle lived in Sacramento in Northern California. So he was like, don't worry, you'll always have me, putting his arm around me, like, oh, he's going to treat you like a queen. So I just went along. My dad was just like, well, whatever you want. He didn't push it either way. My dad was there, my sister was there. And my sister said, I think you should just go for it. And so I was just kind of looking at everybody else about what I should do, and I went along with it. And I remember the next day, even at the engagement, in India, things happen so fast. So everyone's there. There's these people bringing these large bouquets of flowers, all these sweets, all this food. And it shocked me in that moment, like what was happening. And I remember I cried, like I just broke down and I started crying and I was shaking. And my dad was sitting with me. And he just said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know. Everything's just happening so fast. I wish he was a little bit more, um, I wish he understood American culture a little bit better." That's what I was saying because I was thinking like he seemed so different, but I didn't really have the vocabulary. I didn't really have the words to state what my nervous system was telling me at the time, that this is not the right person or this is a wrong decision. And so I went along with it. And within 6 months, I went back home. 6 months later, he came to America on a fiancé visa. And you have 90 days to get married when someone arrives on a fiancé visa. And I remember that was the only time I said, I want to get married. I'll get married to him, but on the 89th day. So I was like, I need a little bit of time to get to know him. But again, his uncle kept pushing, like, no, just do it right away. He can get a social security card and start working and saving for you all. So again, I neglected myself. I abandoned myself. I didn't listen to what my body was telling me. And so within 2 weeks of him arriving, we had a court marriage. And then, eventually within a few months, we had the actual Indian wedding. It was a huge wedding. There were 750 people. It was in San Francisco, this grand, beautiful wedding. But again, was just like not really feeling happy, not feeling good about what was happening. And he was very guarded in speaking up and showing who he was. I think that was part of it, that I felt like I really didn't know him. And then within a month of us getting married, he just started getting more and more jealous, wanting to check my phone all the time. Who am I talking to? He started following me to work and just like a lot of impulsive behaviors also. He was just like he got like 5 traffic tickets within a month, speeding and doing, I don't know what he was doing. He's just a very impulsive person. And that's when I realized he's just like not stable. But I kept complying to keep the peace. I have a schema of self-sacrifice. So I was just like, well, whatever we need to do to keep the peace. And it was never enough. It started off with verbal abuse, putting me down all the time. And that turned into emotional abuse and eventually physical abuse. And so I didn't tell my family right away, even though they lived 15 minutes away. I didn't want to worry them. And I felt like I need to just figure it out with, what to do. And so I didn't tell anybody really. It wasn't until one day I went home one afternoon and my sister was there and we were sitting on the sofa, and I remember I was wearing kind of a skirt. And so it was just like up to my knees, and right on the inner corner of my knee, there was like a burn mark from an iron. And because he had burned me with an iron while I was laying on the bed, he was ironing his shirt and he just like put the press on me for no reason. And that's when my sister saw the scar. And then I told her what happened. And she was just like really shocked and surprised. And she told my mom right there, right away. And then my mom, she was livid. She was very angry, very upset. And so she called him over. We had a family meeting, trying to figure out what was happening. He was crying. He was like, I didn't mean to. It's not like that. Just a lot of gaslighting too, kind of putting things on me. And I felt like I was going crazy because he was trying to turn my own family against me. And then we stayed together, trying to make it work. Eventually, there was another situation where the neighbors saw him punched me in the eye outside of our apartment. I blacked out. I had a black eye, blacked out completely. And the neighbors actually saw. I was living close to Travis Air Force Base, so my neighbors were in the military. I think they had already been picking up on things they were hearing and seeing. I never spoke to anyone directly, so I don't even know who those 2 men were that saw that night what happened. But after he hit me, he ran towards the exit gate, and the neighbors chased him down and held him there, the ones who called the police. He did end up getting arrested. I was encouraged by the DA to press charges, but I didn't want to. I just said, maybe we need time apart. I don't know what I want to do. But because in California, if anytime there's like a victim assault, even if the victim doesn't want to press charges, the DA still does, the state still does. And so they went ahead, and that's why he went to jail for a long time. And they found all this other evidence, like tape recordings of him telling me that he's going to kill me and kill himself if I ever try to leave. I don't know why he would record himself saying all of these things, but it ended up being more evidence where he had $1 million bail. It was on all the front newspaper. And that's how our community found out. And so the Punjabi community is a very close-knit community. There's not so many of us kind of in the Bay Area, but the ones that know us, Like I said, there were so many people at my wedding because my parents are very dialed in our community. So people started finding out. And then I just moved back in with my parents. I, and then I had severe PTSD and then some depression too. I didn't know what was happening. And it took me a while. I was just kind of going through the motions. I went back to do my master's, just kind of because it gave me structure, but not really present with my school. I was working at Kaiser Hospital also on the weekends and just not really disconnected from myself. And then over time, after a couple of years, my brother was also living at home at the time. And he had just started bodybuilding. So he was in the gym all the time. And he would always tell me, come to the gym. So I'd go with him every now and then. But then one day we, as a family, we went to his show. He was competing. And that's where I saw this women's division. And it's called bikini bodybuilding. And I had never seen that before. I'd never heard of it. Because you think of when you're thinking about women bodybuilding, there's on TV or in media, they just show the big women's divisions. And so, you never think about this division, they looked like Wonder Woman, or that's what I was thinking, because they were feminine, but they had some muscle, they looked strong. And I was impressed, I was like, that's so cool. Not that I wanted to do that. I never thought of myself doing that. I was just like, oh, wow, that's incredible. And then one of his very good friends, my brother's good friend, was a personal trainer. And he started posting transformations of a lot of women and men that he was working with. And some of them became competitors. And then I reached out to him on Facebook, just commented, trying to be funny. And I was like, can you make me look like that? One of the transformations that he posted. And then he sent me a direct message and he was like, come to my gym at this time on this day. And I remember feeling like this rush, this shock, kind of nervous, scared, because he was more serious than me at the time. But it was also an opportunity for me to really go for it. So I said, okay, I showed up. And his name is Ariel. Ariel started training me in his private gym. And he trained me for almost 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. While I was training, I went in first for the aesthetics, for the physical change. But within a couple weeks, I started noticing this mental and emotional shift that was happening within me. Because as you know, probably if you train, you have to look in the mirror. I never looked at myself in the mirror. You have to have your form, chest up, shoulders back, really standing in a power stance with your form. I never stood like that in my life ever. And so it was my physiology, my body, it was making changes before it was intellectual, but I started feeling different. And over time, I just started to feel more confident. And that's when I went back and I said, I'm going to apply it for my doctorate. And that was something I always wanted to do, but I had lost confidence during that time when I was married that I didn't think I could be a doctor anymore. So I went for my master's because it felt more attainable. But then that's when it gave me the confidence to go back to school and to start trying new things. I started boxing. That's when I started my yoga journey. I just went to a yoga studio. I was just like, I want to try everything. I felt like I had a brand new chance at life. And this is now what I understand through research is it's called post-traumatic growth. And I started making meaning out of my adversity and my situation and seeing it as not as just a trauma that happened, but something that I had experienced. And I was learning how strong I am, how resilient I am, how powerful I am. And I am not giving my power away anymore. And so because of that situation, it is really what gave rise to everything else that followed after. So I don't regret it, and for a long time, I didn't even talk about it because I didn't want anyone to talk down to my family. It wasn't their fault. We went through that as a family system. But today I can talk about it more because I understand it differently and I understand myself differently because of that experience.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that there. And there's so much depth there. And, people should go back and listen to that there because there's a couple of things I want to pick up on. And, we're both part of Speakers Institute, and that term we hear is the Kairos moment. And I pick up 2 Kairos moments there. The Kairos moment of when your sister saw the burn mark, which then instigated that whole story unraveling very quickly, which then shifted that. And the second Kairos moment is the fact that you went to watch a bodybuilding show. And those 2 moments have basically triggered a different phase in life for you. And again, it's so funny because both of those were not intentional. And it's so interesting how things happen in our lives. And sometimes we put intention to something so much and we miss out those moments that are not intentional.
and they sometimes bring out the greatest growth. And I'm not saying intention is bad, but it's so interesting how life happens and the universe provides, the universe does things for that to happen. But also, what I love in your narrative and your story is that this is something that a lot of people face out there in different forms, and the lack of confidence because of the stories they've been told or being told, and the putting down that you can't actually be yourself because of X, Y, Z. But I also love how you spoke about that it's not just a one moment discovery, it's an actual journey that you go through for yourself. You've got to go through, as you said before, it's the post traumatic growth. Like the saying, it's always darkest before the dawn. You have to get to that stage there. But it's about whether you get onto the stage or not. It's awesome that you had, Ariel, you had your sister there in those moments there, because I'm 100% sure. And it was challenging. It wasn't an easy thing. It was a process for you to go through that emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't an overnight change either, because again, these are, when we think about our schemas and the way our nervous system responds to stress, it's built in early in life. And so to make changes, it does take time and practice, but also a lot of self-trust. A lot of times we don't trust ourselves because we've never given ourselves the opportunity. And I had no self-trust. Like I said, I grew up so passive and asking everybody else, what do you think I should do? And it wasn't until this happened that I had to. All I had was myself. And I learned that no, actually, when my nervous system is speaking to me and my gut intuition is saying something, I'm going to listen now every single time. And now we have science to prove what's actually happening. We call this neuroceptive awareness, that, our nervous system is always scanning our environment for threat and for safety. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're overriding it with our thoughts and our beliefs, then we're abandoning ourselves. We're doing a disservice to ourselves.
That's so beautifully put, because, it's something we don't actually think about or realize. Really, it's really quite funny. Just before I jumped on the podcast, I was just watching an educational video, and in there they shared the fact that we all think, we get a trigger, we have a response, but our body doesn't work like that. Our nervous system is always, as you said, always just searching. And according to this clip that I watched, whether it's true or not, the person on there said that our brain is subconsciously always working 8 seconds before, like it's always trying to. And the analogy that they use, and I love your thoughts on it, is that when you're going into a room, when the door is closed, your brain is already projecting what might be behind the door. And based on your past patterns, either going to go, it's going to be amazing in there, or I'm going to be super nervous in there. And that's really fascinating for me. And I love how you speak about the nervous system regulation, because you mentioned it quite a few times that I felt this, but I didn't listen to it. And I'd love to know, because of the work that you do right now, is how do we know that this is what we're listening to versus it's just a passing phase?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. It is something, I think there's an inner knowing. In yoga, we call it Vijnana Maya Kosha. We have layers to the self, and Vijnana Maya Kosha is the wisdom body. And a lot of times, because of what's happening on the outer layers, which is our physical health and well-being, our mental health, our mind, our energetic patterns, those things are clouding our access to our wise self. And so when you're doing work to regulate yourself physically, again, for me, it was through weight training, going to the gym, and also yoga, that gave more access to help me to pay attention to my mental chatter, my voice, my self-talk, and also energetic patterns, my breath, and how I was carrying and what animates the body, pranamaya, kosha. So when those things are cleared, those channels are cleared, we have more access to the wise self, the higher self. And so it's hard to know what you really feel, what your wise self is telling you, unless you're practicing other strategies that give you access. And that's why even meditation is so great, or just sitting quietly, or going out in nature quietly, connecting with nature, helps to regulate our nervous system in ways that help us to feel more connected to ourselves and really listen, because our body is always speaking to us. We're just not listening all the time. So it's always there, but we're just not accessing it. Because especially the world that we live in, with so much stimulation and so many things happening outside of us, it's overwhelming. There's only so much we can hold. So there's like cognitive overload, especially in emotional responsibilities and feeling depleted and burned out. We're not going to have as much access to that voice. So if your audience is listening right now, I just encourage you to do things so that you give yourself that space to listen, because your body is so intelligent. There is just so fascinating. It'll always tell you what it needs and what it wants for you to thrive.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word, right? Is thriving, not surviving. Because we operate in a survival mode, but the thriving mode is what we miss.
Yes.
And I love it because, we have this podcast at the end of January, and a lot of people are setting up their goals for the year and resolutions and whatever term you want to call it. But with someone who's worked in this space, sometimes do you see that people set these resolutions or goals or whatever framework, but they're not actually aligned with what their body's telling them? So I'm doing something because I should or I have to do that. And in your space, do you see that and challenge that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's another great question because it's so true, especially like you said, New Year's times, everyone's setting resolutions and we're talking about mindset hacks and what do we do and willpower and discipline. And those things are great. And it helps us to make change initially. When we have insight, we learn something, a tip, we put it into action, and then we're just going through it with willpower and discipline. And it works for a while, but if you haven't learned how to feel safe in your body, the moment you hit a wall, as you start getting burned out and tired and depleted, you're going to revert back to old patterns because your nervous system hasn't aligned to the change yet. And so instead of like the old order of operations is insight, action, and discipline or willpower, but that leads to burnout. So I work with a lot of people experiencing burnout, especially high performers and professionals. But the order of operations that I teach is safety, capacity, and sustainable change. So with safety, your nervous system has to learn that I am safe. I am safe in my environment. I can orient myself. I can know what's going on with my body. I know what's going on around me. And as you're doing that, you start building more capacity to tolerate stressors and demands that are coming at you. So it's like, okay, even if a setback happens, because I have more capacity now, I can take it. I can challenge, I can get through it. I know I can be resilient through it. But if you're just doing it through discipline and willpower, it's not enough and it's going to feel really harsh. And over time, your body's just going to put a brake. And that's where we go into freeze mode. People procrastinate, they stop showing up. Not because they're lazy, but because they've been overriding their nervous system cues and not paying attention to the gradual change that needs to happen. So this work, it's not an overnight fix if you're doing it the right way. It is done through gradual change, and that's how I teach it. I have a program, it's a 12-week program called Unstuck Burnout to Breakthrough, and it's for women who are high performers, high achievers, especially a lot of first-generation high achievers who never learned these skills and strategies to self-regulate and now are experiencing burnout and stress and feeling stuck in their life. And so we're doing a lot of somatic work, nervous system regulation, schema work, so that your beliefs and your emotional processing, like all of that has to go hand in hand. It can't just be like one or the other. So that's why I like to teach this for providers, right? Because if you go to a doctor now for trauma, a lot of the work is cognitive. They're telling you about your memories and how you're processing things and working through that, but they're leaving the body completely out of the picture. So people are going then to yoga studios, like, okay, I'll just do yoga to self-regulate. But even that, a yoga teacher only has so much training. They're not trained to assess and to contain. And sometimes they may accidentally re-traumatize a person because of the postures or the things that they're asking them to do. But when you're bringing both together and creating because they're both important, the physical and the mental and the emotional, that you're creating a system and you're understanding your body as holistic, that's where sustainable change happens. And it feels liberating. It doesn't feel like you have to do these things. It's more like, this is just who I am. And you can be more free when you're living that way.
And it's so beautiful because if we think about it, we come into the world as a system. We're a holistic human body. When you're a baby, you do all these things. At some point in our lives, we separate the spiritual, the well-being with a different manifestation. And I love the fact that you speak about, we've got to look at it as a holistic system, because when we're happy holistically, all the things come into play. When I say happy, I mean everything's aligned. It means that you will have challenges. Life is going to be full of challenges. It's really unrealistic to think that, hey, I'm going to live a happy life with no challenges. That is impossible. But when, as you said, when the challenge comes, you have trained your body to find the stage of how do I overcome that. And when you're talking about this, a quote comes to mind. The Mike Tyson quote is, "Everyone is pretty awesome. Get to the boxing ring until they get their first punch. Everyone is training until something happens and they go, a little bit violent, but hey, it's the way the world works, right?"
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Gotta get in it and see what it's like to fail and to make mistakes. And getting back, you can get back up through discipline and willpower. But when you're doing it with self-love and self-compassion, you're going to have a way more resilience. And we know this even from compassion literature, that people who are hard on themselves and have a high inner critic when they make a mistake or they're struggling, like, what's wrong with me? I can't get it together. I keep failing. If they're punishing themselves in that moment of struggle, it's like they're kicking themselves while they're already down. And that actually feeds depression and it feeds anxiety. And again, we know this from research. And on the other side, where people who are kind to themselves and compassionate toward themselves are kind of coaching themselves through struggles, like, it's okay, that was a setback. What did I learn? How am I growing from this? They're going to be a lot more resilient, not only in managing that one stressor, that one adversity that they're going through, but in their stressors in general life. So in other areas of their life. And it makes sense, right? Because if you're not punishing yourself all day, your body is going to be more resilient. Like, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to grow. I can be curious about it. And then you move on. You can kind of get through other challenges. You're not carrying that punishment with you into your relationships, into work, into other important parts of your life. So that self-talk is so important.
And it's so true, because self-talk happens all the time. The minute you get up to the minute you go to bed. And it's really, I love the way you put that we've got to be aware of the story we're telling ourselves. We have all these manifestations. I am beautiful. I am whatever, right? Whatever we say, those affirmations. But if you could be saying that, but if your mind is saying the total opposite, it's never going to work. It's that internal dialogue that's more important than the external dialogue.
Yeah, so true. Exactly.
And this is the great shares, but I'd love to talk about your personal story. So you share this, which is beautiful. What is it like for you when you shared it for the very first time, your story? Because as you said, there's a family, there's the community, there's Dr. Minnie's reputation as well. And when you share that, what is that like for you and your nervous system regulation when for the first time you shared your life story?
Yeah, it was, it was actually in the moment, like, I didn't expect to talk about it that day. And it was actually on another podcast. It was on a fitness podcast. And she was just asking about my journey into fitness. And I just started talking about, everything. And I think like she was my friend too. So it was just felt like very conversational. So I felt natural just starting to talk about it. But it wasn't until I went back home and then she released the podcast and I listened to myself and, I just kind of broke down. I was just like crying, like I'd been holding so much in, but so liberated, so free. Because when you're not talking about something, whether it's intentionally or not, you're actually telling yourself, I shouldn't talk about it because I should be ashamed of this. And so shame starts to kick in, or fear even start driving your beliefs or the way you're seeing yourself. And even though, again, it wasn't at the top of my mind anymore, in my life, I had already been moving on and, I'd finished school already. I'm now practicing as a psychologist. When I had this interview, it was something I didn't realize I was still holding on to, where it was creating a block in me, in my expansion. And I was wondering about that too, because I knew even in my career, I was, working at hospitals and doing the work, but it still didn't feel fulfilling. And I knew it felt like something, there was a block. I didn't understand it. But once I started to talk about this without shame, and again, it was very clear that it was not my family's fault, and I love my traditions. I love my culture. I love being Indian. I wasn't forced. It was my own decision to go. My siblings never had an arranged marriage. It was only me that did that. So it was my own choice too. So I didn't want people to misunderstand them either. But because of the way I've now learned about myself and what happened and how this happened, I'm not blaming myself. I'm not blaming my family. I'm not even blaming him. It's just more like I understand the sequence of events and what happened and where I myself can hold myself accountable as far as understanding my own body and my nervous system signals. And that's why I love to teach this to other people, that these are not small things. It's not, there's actually hard science of what's actually happening when we're experiencing that gut feeling reaction, and to listen. And so with my family, I did share the podcast with my brother and my mom. I didn't really share it with my dad or put it out in the community. I didn't like put it on blast on socials right away or anything because it still felt a little sensitive because I had never talked about it. But, when my brother listened to it, he was really happy about, that I was able to talk about it. And again, for me, it was an empowering experience and it's given rise to who I am today. So my family, like today, they see me as this confident, assertive person. And they know it's because I've been putting in the work and the effort and they trust me more now, right? They trust me that I know what I'm doing and, I understand myself. I'm not just going out talking bad about what happened. There's an intention behind what I'm sharing.
Yeah, and I guess, like you said, there was a key word you used there, the blame. And the word blame, we in any situation, we either will blame somebody, we'll blame ourselves, we'll blame something. It's human nature to do that there. But what I loved about what you said, it's not about, it was the sequence of events. And that reminds me of something that I keep talking about in different places, is that in that moment of time, you make the best decision with the information that you have. At that point in time, you made a choice and you had no idea what the choice was. And a lot of the times I find, and I'm including this as well, I don't think about that and I blame myself for doing this here. But I don't realize that in that moment, that exact moment, this is the information I had. And I just made my best choice. And it's a good reminder for all listeners out there here. Dr. Minnie, and I love what you shared here, but I also love to know about you. How does Dr. Minnie decompress when you're not teaching, when you're not in the gym, when you're not being an awesome self? What do you do for yourself and your well-being? Apart from yoga and the gym.
I think, it's interesting because that is it, like this is my lifestyle. Those don't feel like things I have to do or it's like checking off a list. That does it. Everything goes hand in hand for me. And that's why, I'm very open, even with my clients that I work with, that I'm in the fitness community, that I compete and it's nothing to be, this is just who I am. And so everything goes hand in hand. So even when I'm meeting my friends, like I'm like, let's go for a hike or let's go to the gym together, so it's not separate, I guess I would say, when it comes to work-life balance, it's more about work-life integration. And so even when I'm hanging out with people, I want to make sure that they're feeding my mind and my energy in a way that's resourcing me, not depleting me. So I'm very careful now of how I spend my time, who I'm spending my time with, how I'm expending my energy, because I need to be, again, resourced for everything else that I have going on in my life. So it is for me, it is, the gym is my number one, like that's my go-to. I go train early in the morning before I start my workday. I have friends that I train with. I have a trainer, so that helps hold me accountable too. And then yoga, and I do that on my own, or sometimes I'll drop into a studio. And then also just like eating healthy nutrition, which is really important, when it comes to how we're feeling and managing our mental health. I do these things now because I love my body, not because I hate it. And I think that's where sometimes a lot of people are going into like the gym or changing their lifestyle, changing their diet because they feel like, oh, I have to fix something about myself. But no, it's like, no, like I said, our body is so intelligent. It's your best friend. So now you want to take care of this best friend who's always trying to keep you alive and survive. It's like we're not thinking about how our body is always working in service of our health and survival, even though it feels like it's not at times. But we also have to put in the work on the other side to make sure that it's getting what it needs to be our best self.
And this is so beautifully said, because a lot of people, I asked that question on purpose because a lot of people have to add on things into life to get the balance. You keep adding, and as you said before, it's an add-on, so therefore it's quite easy to drop off. But I love how you said, actually, this is integration, it's work-life integration, because what I found as well is, and listening to you as well, you can see that just by incorporating into who you are as a person, by loving yourself and loving your body, it doesn't become a chore. It doesn't become, oh, I have to go to the gym, or I have to. It's I want to, and it's just part of my life. And the reason I say it, because a lot of people I talk about, oh, what do you do for fun? I was like, well, my life is fun. So what else do I need to add into that there? But it's the narrative that we keep getting told about. What else are you doing for fun when you can just go, this is what I'm doing right here is fine, it's perfect.
It's
all
like,
good.
this is fun to me. My work is fun, even though we're talking about heavy things. Sometimes it's so energizing because it's so rewarding, when you see the change that people are making and the work that everyone's putting in to be a better version of themselves. Like, that's fun to me. It's so exciting, to see people grow and to put in that time, and I'm helping them. So it doesn't even feel like work to me that I'm doing it. This is it. Like you said, there's no separate fun, it's just like I'm having fun with the work that I'm doing. I don't even want to call it work. It's just part of how I contribute to the world.
I love that last line because with contribution to the world, a lot of us, and I'm including myself as well, we talk about my title in the world is blah, 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 blah. And then when you forget about actually what is my contribution to the world, and when sometimes you go, my contribution and my job title are misaligned, that is a great wake-up call to do actually when I need to find an alignment here with this and this equals like what you said. Why use the word work? It's just who I am as a person, which is so powerful. I love this. Dr. Mini, we've been speaking for almost an hour now, and there's so much depth. I mean, this is such a beautiful conversation. I'm sure we could keep talking forever and ever, but I'm also mindful of your time. And I'd love to round up the podcast, and we might get you back again if you're interested to share more. A couple of questions. I guess the first question is, if people want to connect with you or do some stuff with you, what's the best way for them to do that? And
Sure. So you can connect with me online at drmini.co. So that's my website. So drmini.co. I have a bunch of free downloadable resources for the community. So if you want to learn more about your cognitions, your schemas, mental fitness, I have a free workbook that you can download. And also you can learn about where I'm at, what I'm doing, events that I'm speaking at, teaching at. Also on Instagram. So it's dr.mini_kaur. So Dr. Mini Kaur. So I'm pretty active on Instagram, and so you can find me there. And then also on LinkedIn. So it's my full name on LinkedIn, Manmeet, Manmeet. My last name's Rattu, Rattu. You can find me also on LinkedIn.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you two more questions. The first one is Cape Town. Let's talk about your retreat in South Africa that's coming up in a few months. How exciting is that?
I am so excited about this. I've been to dozens of retreats, so many retreats around the world, just because I've been in the yoga space, a lot of yoga retreats globally and also here locally. And so over time, I always thought about, well, I love this, but I would do this different. And now I feel I'm finally doing my first own retreat, and it's happening outside of Johannesburg in South Africa. And it's going to include safari and hiking and a lot of education as well. So I'm going to be talking about nervous system regulation, stress, what that does to your brain, your body. And then we're going to do practices, obviously, like yoga, meditation. But people will understand what's happening with their biology when they're practicing these skills. And then also, of course, giving a lot of practices that people can take at home. Because again, when you go to these retreats, sometimes it's like you're great while you're there, for that 7 days or maybe a couple weeks after, but then we go back into old patterns, the same environment, and it seems like we've undone everything. So part of the program is going to be teaching skills that you can continue to integrate, so it becomes a part of your lifestyle and not just something that you have to go escape to do. That's really important to me. So it's called Burnout to Breakthrough. And it's open to everyone, individuals, couples also are welcomed. And so we're going to be, kind of learning about how to recover from burnout and also living, these are, again, like high professional, high functioning people, knowing that they're capable of more, but maybe feeling like they're at their max or at their capacity and feeling stuck, not knowing where to go, what to do. So a lot of like embodied body-based practices, but also cognitive structure as well. So I'm super excited about that. And so you can reach out to me on my, again, on my website. You can message me at drmini.co, or on my Instagram, you can just send a DM, write breakthrough as the code word, so I know that that's what you're interested in. If you DM me breakthrough, I'll know that you are interested, and we can get on a call and I can share more about that retreat.
The smile on your face as you speak about it. How cool is that? I'm so excited for you and our listeners out there. If you go along, don't forget to share that, because I think it's going to be pretty awesome. And also, what the awesomeness to this is the fact that it's not just what you do while you're there. It's about what you can do when you're away from that bit, because as we know, the danger of Monday, come Monday, we forget about the hype. You go to Tony Robbins, you go anywhere, you go, this is amazing. And then Monday comes, okay, back to my old patterns to Wednesday. Thank you for sharing that there. And I'm excited for that for you as well, for those that come along to your retreat. One day I'll get there. Dr. Minnie, one day I'll get there. Or you can come to New Zealand and we'll love to have you. Amazing. Beautiful. Our last question for today is, our podcast is called Baskets of Knowledge, and you've shared a lot of knowledge today. But we invite our guests to share one piece of knowledge to put into our basket that myself or our audience that has served you well in your life, where you go, this might be one thing that, take it or leave it, but it's one thing that I would love to share.
Yeah, it's a great question. Because like you said, there's so many things that we can do here. If it's one thing, I think going back to what I was speaking about earlier, about learning to trust your own nervous system, learning to trust your own body, your gut intuition. What is it saying to you? Even your emotions, there's intelligence in our emotions. It's like a signal, an antenna, of what needs to change. There's underlying needs that we all have. And it doesn't make you a needy person. It just means that you're self-aware and emotionally attuned to yourself. And so my recommendation, my basket of knowledge to all of you who are listening, if it's just one thing that you're taking away from this conversation, is please take the time to learn to listen to yourself. Your body already knows the truth, and you already have the answers within you. All you have to do is listen. And if change is hard, because it is, we can get support. And that's why I'm here. That's the work that I do. And there's other resources I'm sure that you have access to. Change is helpful. Like even in the beginning, my change happened with a trainer, right? With my bodybuilding or with my family, people around me. So we need support. We can't live in isolation. So if you're feeling alone, knowing that, okay, my body's telling me I need to change, now what? Please access some support. And again, you can always reach out to me too.
I really like that there, because often we're given all these amazing resources, fantastic, but our body is our greatest resource. And as you said earlier on in the conversation, our body wants us to survive and thrive. This is the way it works. And I love your terminology was, your body is your best friend. It's a BFF. And if your BFF is telling you something and you're not listening, are you being its BFF? Probably not. So I love that piece of knowledge. Tamini, thank you so much for jumping on. Any last words before we close off today's episode?
No, just thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all the work that you do and the love that you put out in the world. And thank you. And I appreciate being a part of this community and this conversation. And yeah, I hope to be back sometime.
Thank you so much. It's our privilege. And like I said, when we first connected, I just knew that there's going to be so much that you will share with the world that the world will listen to, because a lot of us go through versions of your story.
Yes.
And it's a version of a story, right? So thank you so much. For listeners out there, thank you for having a listen. Hopefully you've picked up one or two things. If you haven't, it's because you've fallen asleep. Go back and listen again, because I'm pretty sure that there's something really beautiful for you here. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on the podcast. But the most important thing is, don't forget, over the next few days, don't forget to find a reason to smile. Find something to put into your box of knowledge. And the most important thing, like Dr. Mini said, is don't forget to listen to your best friend, which is your body. Till next time, ka kite, stay awesome. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge. Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your baskets of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.